Okay, we are live. And actually, looking a little bright, so let's see something. Oh, that is too dark. Maybe there. About here. How's, how's that? I don't know. I need to mess with the lighting again. It's gotten worse, I feel like. It used to be better. Okay. I feel like this is going to be a great stream tonight. So, let's see who's here. Hit the like button if you are here. Help the algorithm. Subscribe if you're not subscribed. I need to get better at asking people to do that. But I want to talk about meaning tonight and kind of what spurred this like desire to speak about this at this time, because this is one of those things that's like those never-ending conversations of free will versus determinism, meaning versus, I don't know, like a different kind of meaning. I would say some people would say life is meaningless, but I wouldn't even say that the debate is meaninglessness versus meaningfulness. It would be like meaning in one capacity versus meaning in another. And we're going to get to that tonight. That's what this is going to be about. So I listened to a stream that it wasn't a stream, it was a clubhouse again. That was again with Eric Weinstein leading it, and it was just called Meaning. It was just a room, and it was another one of those conversations that just didn't go anywhere except Eric hit on something very important, and he broke meaning down into two different kinds of meaning, or two different aspects of meaning, I would say is a better way of putting it. And he called them proximate meaning and ultimate meaning. And he gave examples of each that, they were okay. I don't think they were like the best. Some girl actually was like, I hate them both, or something like that. And he was just like, too bad, because this is my room, which was, I'm glad that happened to him, because I probably would not have been as graceful as he handled it, as gracefully as he handled it. But, like, that's just not I don't know, it's not a helpful comment. But his breakdown of proximate meaning versus ultimate meaning is very important. I think it's correct. And that is because meaning exists, like all objective structures, in a superpositional state. It means two things happening at once that seem like they are not related, but actually are related, or seem like they are even contradictory or mutually exclusive, or paradoxical together, but are actually dependent. And I think that it's important to really break down like what meaning is. And Eric gave this definition that's his definition of life. It's the meaning of life according to Eric Weinstein. And it is one sentence, and it goes, the meaning of life is the struggle to impart meaning to meaning, which is a triadic expression of a meaningful definition of meaning that is meaningful, almost so. And that is not a coincidence, but it's still too complicated, even if it's accurate, to explain to people. I think who they kind of have to like meditate on that for a while in order to get it. And I came up with much better definitions, I think, of what proximate meaning and ultimate meaning would be. And proximate meaning is when when you are impacted. Okay? And ultimate meaning is when you impact others. And notice, and this is the key here, that the impacted entity that is the determining factor of the manifestation of meaning in both of these instances is a sentient being. It is a someone, not a something. In proximate meaning, I didn't even want to say when something impacts you, because that is even misleading. So I just left it as when you are impacted. Okay, so you are the impactee being impacted that is a sentient being, and that means that whatever impact that has been had on you, that is meaningful. Okay? And then with ultimate meaning is the transcendent meaning. It's meaning beyond self. And I think a good definition of this is your impact on others. And usually linked to a continuous lineage in some way. The future, your impact on the future. Your impact even on the past. And I'd say you simultaneously impact the past and the future at the same time. If you choose a path of hedonism and don't abandon the concept of transcendent meaning or ultimate meaning, and that embrace the idea that the goal of life is to be happy. That's the meaning of life, is to be happy. Or not even, I would say that if you try that, then what you're going to end up even beyond happiness. You're going to end up in just like the meaning of life is pleasure. That is hedonism. So you're going to end up kind of dishonoring every generation that's come before you that has struggled through the struggle of life to get to where it got to where you are existing, and then you just throw it all away. Every struggle that they've ever had, every accomplishment that they've ever had, every trial that they've overcome, you have invalidated it all. In a way. Not totally, but in a way. On your level, yeah, it's gone. And, it was beautiful last night. There was this woman who got on, and she was speaking a bit, and she had a baby crying in the background, and she was like, "Oh, I'm gonna go." And Eric was like, "No, like the rule of any room I'm in is that if you have a child, acting up or crying or making noises or whatever, like you can stay and comment and speak the entirety of it, no matter whether or not your child is screaming. Like it should never be a reason to get off the call." And I agree with that completely. I think that is right there, like it's honoring of generations prior and all the trials and meaning that they experienced and meaning that they bestowed. And if you just abandon that, you can also destroy meaning. And not completely, because you are not all of existence, and so you cannot destroy meaning entirely, but you can destroy quite a bit of meaning just by abandoning the idea that it exists. And I also would say that it is a philosophy that is, it's truly paradoxical. It's nonsensical to say that meaning doesn't exist. Because if meaning doesn't exist, then you can't even justify your own existence, even if you embrace hedonism, because the majority of life is not pleasure. It's just not. Like, even for those who are of extraordinary wealth, who can just, buy pleasure whenever they would like it, it's still, you are trying to compensate for a lack of feeling meaning by, buying a bunch of things, I guess you could say. So, like, if life was meaningless, then why are you discontent with feeling meaninglessness. Like, it's a self-defeating idea in practice. It is. You can't actually do it. So this is kind of what I wanted to talk about tonight. I wanted to kind of go over this idea that was the original name of my stream years ago, was Math of Meaning. The math of meaning. The mathematics of, what is meaningful. And it was kind of like a, I don't want to say an homage. I don't even know what that really means. But like, it was obviously, similar to Maps of Meaning by Jordan, Jordan Peterson's like lecture series, I think it was. And I think it was a book too. I'm not sure. But I abandoned that idea, and then I went with the logos of logic, which was actually very similar to saying the math of meaning. Meaning is your impact on sentient beings and not on yourself. Okay, so like it is you can't apply meaning to yourself unless you create another that can, then you are creating meaning for yourself. But you can't really create meaning yourself through the satisfaction of, or the impact on your own self. Okay, so like you do not create meaning for yourself by learning how to ride a bike. It's an accomplishment. It boosts your ego. It's building of your skills. It's important, but it's not making you more meaningful just to the fact that you can ride a bike. Now, if you become, I don't know, like, or even let's say you learn how to do CPR. It's like, that doesn't make you meaningful unless you actually can do CPR on someone else that exists. But if nobody exists and you taught yourself how to do CPR and nobody else ever would exist in the world, it's like, how is that meaningful? It's not meaningful, which means that you can't really impart meaning onto yourself via just the, alteration or impacting of yourself alone. Now, you can have children and that would impart meaning onto yourself. You can help another and that can impart meaning onto yourself. But that's always by impacting another. And it was interesting. I was listening and somebody said, who was a mathematician on this stream or this Clubhouse call, said that he, as a mathematician, finds an enormous amount of meaning in the impacting, that impact that he feels or that he receives when he is just, at his whiteboard or computer working on math and learning math. But then he said it's because he feels like he is learning or being communicated to in a language that only the universe speaks. And it's like, okay, so you're anthropomorphizing the universe in order to make mathematics meaningful, which I actually would say that makes sense, and it's actually true. You should anthropomorphize the universe. It is a sentient being, and mathematics is a language that it speaks, and you do get meaning out of that as somebody who sits in front of Excel for hours at a time and, feels an enormous amount of meaning by finding mathematical patterns. But I don't think that it's coming from not a non-sentience. I think it's coming from sentience. I think it's coming from consciousness. It's not coming from an unconscious, matter. And I've said before that the reality is, though, is that matter is what matters, and if you combine that with the truth, not, the hypothesis, but the reality that consciousness is all that exists. Sentience, I'd say, is all that exists. It's a better way of putting it. Somebody even said on the stream last night, they were like, consciousness is not as well defined as sentience. I was like, that's very true. And that's why the name of my theory is Sentient Singularity Theory, instead of talking about consciousness so much. And that is when consciousness or sentience is all that exists, then all that exists is sentience, and if all that exists is sentience, then sentience is what matters, and matter is what matters. So there was this guy. This sounds very roundabout, but the point is that there was this one guy that I would say believed in God, and I don't like to say believed in God, but God was part of his worldview on this call, and he said that part of the problem with the kind of lacking of meaning that people are feeling in young, especially young people these days, is that we have reduced the entire universe down to atoms and molecules and things like that. And I don't actually think that that's the problem. The problem is that we have not realized what atoms and molecules are. And you have this battle right now between testable materialism that is, comes from what we call the sciences. And then you have this, transcendent philosophy coming from what we would call religion. And one of them doesn't seem to be so easily tested in reality. And I understand that if you're a person who believes in scripture, then you disagree with that. And I understand that too. Scripture isn't, but most people don't interpret scripture properly who don't believe in it. Obviously, if they interpret it properly, even partially properly, they would believe in it. And, I've said before, scripture is what happens. It's not just what happened. If you try and look at it historically, you're going to, purely historically, then you're going to fail. But, and same thing with purely metaphorically. It's a superposition between the two. Just like meaning is a superposition between the proximate meaning and ultimate meaning. And unless you break these two things down, you can't actually attack the problem, because somebody's going to say this is meaningful. When you have an experience, it's meaningful. Somebody else is going to say, well, when you impact another person, that's meaningful. It's like, okay, well, now we're just going to have an argument of whether or not it's meaningful for you to be impacted versus not. And that is a roundabout that can't be reconciled unless you realize that it's a superposition. And all objective structures are superpositions, including atoms and molecules. And they don't have to be separated from the transcendent, meaningful philosophy that we get from theology. I won't say scripture necessarily, because, like I said, people wouldn't believe that. But theology being the idea that just existence itself is a conscious, sentient being. If that is the case, then I would say there is a God. That is the definition of God. So anybody who's asking, well, what God do you mean? The Hindu God, the Christian God, the Jewish God? It's like, if existence itself is a sentient being, God exists. If existence is not a sentient being, God does not exist. And that is the definition. It's the only definition that can possibly exist. Anything else is an argument not worth having, because it's just not. And but the thing is, though, is that if sentience is all that exists, and you embrace sentient singularity theory, or you understand it, then embrace it. Don't embrace it without understanding it. Then you realize that atoms and molecules being reducing the universe down to atoms and molecules is not destroying of meaning. In fact, it is something that brings meaning about. And so this is what I'm going to talk about tonight. Let me just find the right model to look at. Okay, right here. Okay? This is the objective material lineage. Okay? Meaning the lineage of the growth of matter in the universe and of the universe itself. This is the logos. Okay? And you can say over here that a molecule is a molecule, or you could say it's an assembly of atoms, but it is actually both at the same time. A cell is an assembly of molecules. An organism is an assembly of cells. A family is an assembly of organisms. Hadron is an assembly of quarks. These are simultaneous truths. And what this really is it is the reconciliation of the quote-unquote problem of the many and the one. This is the one, and this is the many. And the reality is that they exist in a superposition. So I've said before, this is the head consciousness, which is a particle, and this is the body consciousness, which is a wave of synchronized particles or multiplicity. This is singularity, this is multiplicity, and this is following the reality that a consciousness is, or a sentience, you can even say, is an assembly of entangled fundamental perspectives. I listened to even like a theological talk today about the Trinity, and it got me thinking a lot about the idea of superposition. And I would say that that is the description of a superposition structure as well. And that's true of like marriage. A marriage is like the best triadic structure because it is the triadic structure that you can think of. So is a marriage. In a marriage, you have three perspectives. You have the perspective of, you can look at this to kind of like understand this as well. You have the perspective of the masculine, or the husband, or the male, or man. And then you have the perspective of the feminine, the female, the woman, the wife. And then you have the marriage, which is the constraint that they are within. So kind of like the present moment, reflecting across the present is the past and the future, or reflecting across your current location is the previous location and the new location that you are moving towards. But right here, this would be like this subjective constraint that is the marital structure. So you could say the wife and the husband are reflecting across the marital structure. And this is the true structure of humanity, because humanity is a coin with two sides, heads and tails. Okay? Tails being feminine, heads being masculine. Same thing with when you look right here. This is heads, the head consciousness, and this is tails, the wave consciousness. And you even can observe this in like what a tail is. You think about a lizard walking, like it moves its head first and then its body follows. And then its tail is the final thing that follows. The tail follows the head. The body follows the head. And we are just like a coin. Humanity, or a human, isn't really a man or a woman. And it's not half man and half woman. It's fully man and fully woman at once. This is why I was thinking about like the concept of the Trinity earlier. People say, well, the Messiah is fully man, fully God. And they won't say it's half man, half God. It's not Hercules. It's something else. It's a superposition. Okay. So regardless of whether or not you believe in, Christianity or not, you just know that that's the narrative of Christianity, is that you can be fully one thing and fully another at the same time. And I think that that's correct. So I was thinking about a marriage structure, and how oftentimes we're told to, as men, to get in touch with our feminine side, we have to be balanced. We have to be balanced between our feminine side and our masculine side. And then women too are told to embrace their masculine energy, and then obviously like also maintain some feminine energy. And I think that this is wrong. This is like trying to be Hercules. It's trying to be half feminine, half masculine in yourself. But in the marriage structure, what you can actually have is you can have fully masculine and fully feminine manifest at once. And if the feminine consciousness is the reactive consciousness, which it is, and the masculine consciousness is the active consciousness, which it is, then you can actually have a fully reactive and fully active superposition between two perspectives that also manifest as two persons, but really they are one human in a way, because you can't make another human just with a man, or even just with a woman. You can't do it. I've never heard of other, not even in Christianity is it a truly parthenogenic reproduction with Mary, because she doesn't impregnate herself. Okay, like she's not like my mourning geckos here, which is a species that is a parthenogenic reproducing species, and they're all just girls that clone themselves constantly. There's no males. That's not the same as humans. Human is a marital structure. Now, whether or not, I'm not talking about like government's definition of marriage. I'm talking about a permanent commitment to partner with a member of the opposite sex in order to, have a family, at least, or to be a family. Even if you, for some reason, can't have children, it's still a marital structure. And only in that structure, can you have the manifestation of fully masculine and fully feminine at the same time. Because if to be feminine means to be reactive, who are you going to react to if you are it's just you as one person, whether you're male or female, doesn't matter, and you're just trying to have the simultaneous manifestation of masculine and feminine? It doesn't make sense. Because who are you reacting to? If you are like trying to express your feminine side, you have to be that. To be feminine is to be submissive. It is. It's just, submission is a feminine act. It is. Men should be feminine compared to God. We should submit to God or a higher authority. But I would say that it is only if your man is submitting to a higher authority than him should you submit to him if you're a female, because somebody's got to keep him accountable if he's going to keep you accountable. Like, that's just the way it works. You don't submit to somebody who it doesn't have limits of their own actions, and doesn't hold themselves accountable to the views of someone higher in the hierarchy, and honestly so. And women can pick up on that. So, but this is like very much related to the concept of meaning, is we've destroyed gender dynamics so much that men don't need women and women don't need men in society, according to society's narratives today, which is totally false. And you just need you, and you just need to love yourself in order to feel meaning. Nobody can do that. Maybe God. That's it. No one. And I wouldn't even say God can do it, but God can do it, and he can't do it because this is he exists in a superposition that almost, that nothing else really does. Is that, all is God, because, this is like a saying, and like a Kabbalistic phrase is like, there is nothing but God. And that's true. But there's also multiplicity at the same time. You and your cells are one, but also differentiated. As an organism, you are an assembly of cells, but that is simultaneously one organism and a multiplicity that is an assembly of entangled perspectives coming from cells. So this is something that seems like paradox, but it's actually not when it's viewed objectively, and it's obvious because obviously an organism is an assembly of cells that is a oneness of mind built on a multiplicity of perspectives, because every single cell has its own perspective. And this is the only context that existence exists in is a superposition. And that's why meaning also exists in a superposition. And it's also why meaning can only come from your impact on another. It cannot come from your impact on yourself isolated from interactions with another sentient being. You can't do it. So, but the problem isn't, so bringing it back, to what I was saying is that when the religious person said on this talk that only thinking about the world in terms of atoms and molecules is what's leading to the breakdown in the understanding and perceiving of the reality, I would say, of the existence of meaning, and therefore also resulting in the pushing of false narratives like, I don't know, like a Sam Harris, like, meaning is to be happy, or something like that. Hedonism is meaning. That's obviously false, because just all you have to do is look at how those people really feel who are hedonists over the course of time, not in a singular moment, and you will realize that they feel very unfulfilled. And my grandmother called me the day before that she died, and she was on the phone with me. This was 2 years ago, and she said to me, she said, "I'm not sure if there's a heaven. I hope there's a heaven, but I am grateful that I'm leaving this world regardless. When I look at all the amount of grandchildren that she has and children that she had, and it gave her life meaning, even though she was not somebody who I would say was somebody of, who had belief or faith or, knowledge, awareness of God. I need to just remember to say awareness. It's the way to put it. She was not somebody who I would say had an awareness of God. But she was somebody at the end of her life that had an awareness of meaning. And she told me straight up that gave her comfort. And that which means that if she didn't have that, she would not have had comfort, probably. Like what are you going to do, like, on your deathbed? Be like, I'm so glad that I'm leaving this world having owned Ferrari Enzo. Ferrari Enzo is a very cool car, but no, I don't think and as somebody who really likes the Ferrari Enzo, I don't think that would be my thought on my deathbed. I think I would feel pretty empty if that was the extent of my achievements. So, but the thing is, got a bit distracted, is that we don't realize that atoms and molecules are sentient beings. And if they were, which they are, my math shows it, my models show it, my predictive ability, given sentient singularity theory, shows it, then all of a sudden, if all there is sentience, and every atom and every molecule and every cell and every organism that exists is sentient, has feelings. Feelings are the summation of thoughts. They are the finality of a thought process. Somebody once, who's a listener of this stream, actually said that to me once, and it was brilliant. He's totally right. That if every one of those things is conscious and sentient, is a better way of putting it, all of a sudden, the idea that it's all, just atoms and molecules, and that is what matter is, and hadrons, protons and neutrons, that doesn't give you meaninglessness. In fact, you look to those structures as examples as to why we exist and what is our future, what is our objective pattern. When you realize that a proton is a male and a neutron is a female, it's very easy to see that feminine consciousness is the reactive consciousness, the feminine gender that exists on every single periodicity of consciousness or of sentience, every single scale in the lineage of sentience. Then you realize that it is the reactive consciousness because it's the neutron. And the neutron takes on the charge of that which it is around. It is reacting. It is being led. It is following the proton, which is the male. And they're bound together in a nucleus, like a nuclear family, that is basically an electron cloud or an electron wave, which is sexual energy, creative energy. Okay? And that all of a sudden brings a whole new perspective to the world, because what you realize is that if these are all sentient, hadrons, and atoms, molecules, and cells, and organisms, and families, and just families are organisms that are maneuvering through time, and an organism is an organism that is maneuvering through space, essentially. But an atom is a family, and a hadron is basically like an organism. It means that this is a lineage, and that there is you can kind of deduce from there a finality or a summation or the goal of the universe. And you can think, what if an atom, or not even an atom, let's say a hadron, just decided that the meaning of life was to just break apart and bond with as many. Let's say a proton decided its goal was to interact with as many neutrons as possible, but also break apart from them in order to go and interact with other neutrons. Not to bind with in order to build, but to just, screw around, you could say. Then you wouldn't get atoms that are stable. You wouldn't get molecules that are stable. You wouldn't get cells or organisms, families. So what about us? What if we just choose that the meaning of life is to just blindly or endlessly pursue pleasure instead of building and continuing the logos structure that we're part of, that gives each level meaning? You become meaningless. An organism is meaningful to cells, and cells are meaningful to organisms. Okay? And families are meaningful to organisms, and organisms are meaningful to families. And this is found all across this entire pattern. You can't escape this pattern. You can try, but really where you end up is just in non-existence, which means, you don't exist. Like, This is the structure of existence. It's the logos of existence. And it's always a superposition, just like meaning. Meaning is both proximate and ultimate. But in each of them, it is always a sentient being that is being impacted, that is what is the bringer of meaning itself. So I want to kind of go over this a bit and just build some structure. So when we going over to the structure, which is the binary triality that I've showed before, it's just everywhere from the mathematical order of operations and what I call the fundamental perspectives and our senses, everything. The standard model, fermions, it's everywhere. Colors. Basically, I always like looking at the senses or the mathematical order of operations in order to kind of like break down best what is going on. And so you can do this with meaning.